Now we're going to talk about prepping for that first official three-way meeting. So at this point, you've already had an initial orientation meeting with your teacher candidate, with your supervising practitioner. You've already conducted the first announced baseline observation. You've calibrated with the supervising practitioner. You and the supervising practitioner have entered all of your data into the online form on the CAP online account. And now we have a couple more steps to make sure that we're ready for that first sit-down three-way meeting. What's nice about this interface here on the CAP online account is this whole column. Remember, you're going to have most of these items in future cycle steps. Mine say completed because this reflects a student from a past semester. But what's nice is it bundles all of these tasks and forms and then connects it to a date. So what you see here under My Completed, it will be future for you, is the edit teacher candidate information, which is basically all the same info that you put on that hard copy CAP form. Next is the the announced observation number 1, which is that baseline observation that you and the supervising practitioner just completed. Next is the self-assessment rubric summary and the self-assessment goal setting form. Now, right now I can click on these, but in the semester I couldn't access them as the program supervisor, nor could the supervising practitioner. This is what the teacher candidate is filling out. So after you've conducted your observation, behind the scenes, the teacher candidate is actually trying to rate him or herself on all of the CAP elements and provide evidence to support why he or she is rating him or herself on those particular levels. Additionally, each teacher candidate is going to identify a goal that he or she wants to work on throughout the semester. You may or may not agree with that goal, but this is the process where the teacher candidate is working through it. Right now I can see everything on these forms, but again I couldn't during the semester. Finally, we're all working towards, and I'll zoom in for you because I'm realizing you probably can't see anything I'm pointing at right now. Maybe a little bit better. What I'm pointing to here is the finalized goal and implementation of plan form. Ultimately, the first three-way meeting needs to have everything on this form discussed and settled. So what the heck is going to be entailed in that? We're going to look at that now. So the finalized goal and implementation form really sets the agenda for the first three-way meeting. You'll document that you conducted that first three-way meeting by identifying the date and clicking that yes, you have had that meeting once that meeting is done. So I think we'll look at these forms. Okay, good. So the view announced observation form we don't need to look at, it's already done. Let's look at the finalized goal and implementation form. At the top, you'll see a section that says measure of student learning. Now this is something that you hopefully remembered to discuss with the supervising practitioner at that first orientation meeting. The measure of impact on student learning is an assessment that the supervising practitioner has used in the past and that they feel pretty familiar with, and they have a good sense of how students perform under their tutelage on this assessment. Now, this semester, the teacher candidate is going to teach this content, and the teacher candidate is going to administer this assessment, this tried and true assessment. Now, what the supervising practitioner needs to do is fill out on this side the assessment. So this particular teacher chose an assessment of high-frequency words. This was in a first grade classroom. She wrote, high-frequency words is the measure. Student must be able to quickly identify and read common non-phonetic words. This is an early reading foundation skill that is assessed and progress monitored. The next thing that the supervising practitioner needs to identify is what constitutes high impact, moderate impact, and low impact by the teacher candidate on student learning. So what you'll see here, and we want to make sure to be very clear that this is not quite what we wanted. It was close, but not quite there. So we're going to add to this in a moment. So the supervising practitioner wrote that student scores would be greater than 90%. And that meant that 36 or more words out of 40 were correctly identified and read. Moderate would mean that 70 to 90% of words, which meant 28 to 35 words, were correctly identified, and low meant less than 70, or 27 or less words out of the 40 were correctly identified and read. What we also need to know here is what percentage of learners were able to meet these outcomes. So we want to make sure that we're identifying not only the scores, but also how many students were able to meet this as a proxy for how effective our teacher candidate was in his or her instruction. Now, some of you are going to be in high school, some of you are going to be in different fields, some of you will be in special education. You're going to have all kinds of assessments that are really relevant to your domain. So please don't feel that you need to be tied to anything like this. I think the only takeaway from here is you want to be clear about what the assessment is. The assessment needs to be tried and true, needs to be well known by the supervising practitioner, and then over here you want to talk not only about the grade, the target grade for high, moderate, and low, but also the percentage of learners who should be able to meet this measure if you had a high impact, your teacher candidate had a high impact, if the teacher candidate had a moderate impact, or if he or she had a low impact. Again, this piece needs to be filled out by the supervising practitioner. Let's scroll down. On this same form, if you can believe it, we now have a section that has to be completed, as it says right here, by the teacher candidate. And this is the professional practice goal. This is the SMART goal. This should be based on the baseline assessment feedback that you, the program supervisor, and the supervising practitioner provide the teacher candidate. It also is going to be based on the teacher candidate's self-perceptions. There's supports for this, and I'll show you those in a moment. But ultimately, by the end of the three-way meeting, we really want this goal set. And we want this goal to be a SMART goal. So it needs to be measurable. We need to have a time frame. It needs to have all those critical elements to it. Below down here, they're going to identify basically the CAP element that this goal targets. So this student was interested in meeting diverse needs. Below here is the implementation plan. And the program supervisor and the supervising practitioner, for some reason it's not visible on this form, but both the program supervisor and the supervising practitioner have to fill this out. What this will look like is it will look blank. It will say action steps, support, and timeline frequency. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see the whole page. Oh, it doesn't have it, I'm sorry, because it's saved. And I can't unlock it. But what you'll see over here is add step. So you will fill in content here, 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 and then click add step. When you click add step, another line will appear. You don't have to enter any number. You just have to do greater than at least one line of support. And what this is saying is, it's where you, the teacher candidate and the supervising practitioner say, okay, here's the goal the teacher candidate has set for him or herself. What supports do they need from the supervising practitioner and program supervisor? And that's what we put in place here. So what you'll want to see is this program supervisor and the supervising practitioner have some sort of resources or support that they're going to provide, and then the frequency with which they will provide it. This could be articles, this could be additional observations, this could be reviewing journal entries, this could be having one-on-one consultation sessions about particular students, anything like that that you'll be doing to provide support. Important to note here on this form, you've got the supervising practitioner filling out the top, the teacher candidate filling out the middle, and the supervising practitioner and the program supervisor filling out the bottom. Now I want to jump back into the main portal and show you the behind the scenes. So how the heck did the teacher candidate get to that finalized goal? Well, there were a lot of steps involved. So again here, all of these steps under completed cycle steps are building towards this first three-way meeting. So you conducted the observation, but behind the scenes, and again, we can't see this in the CAP cycle, I'm only seeing this now because the teacher candidate filled it out and submitted it to me. What the teacher candidate is going to do is assess herself or himself on all the CAP measures, on quality, scope, and consistency. I tend to review this before we get to that first three-way meeting because a lot of times students will rate themselves as exemplary. Remember, teacher candidates need to get on every single CAP element, proficient on quality, needs improvement on scope, and needs improvement on consistency. That's by the end of the semester. So starting off the semester is the baseline. We should not really be seeing students marking themselves as exemplary. But you're also giving them feedback on these exact same measures so you can have that discussion. So this was the self-assessment that my student conducted for herself. It's fine that it's low, A. B, nobody's going to see this beyond the three of you. So it's really, really fine. Whatever ends up here is pretty solid. The other form that this teacher candidate is working on behind the scenes is this self-assessment rubric summary. So what you see up here at the top is a simplified version of that form I just showed you, where it shows the student's ranking of herself across all elements and across all dimensions. So it's a nice tight summary. Now if you're looking here, you might see, oh wow, she rated herself on meeting diverse needs as unsatisfactory, unsatisfactory, unsatisfactory. She did the same for high expectations. Well, that seems like a natural goal. If students are going to develop their own goals, that might be a natural, oh wow, let's really try and think about that becoming our goal. Different programs will run it in different ways, but that's a nice, it kind of pops out at you in that way. Over here, she identified strengths that she had, and then she provides justification for those strengths. So she identified that well-structured lessons and safe learning environment was strengths. And she really felt strongly that meeting diverse needs it was going to be her goal, and she really identified that it was an area of growth for her. So she justifies why, and she's identified it here. Finally, she goes through a set of questions that she provides responses to, such as, why is this particular topic so important? What's the objective of this topic? So these are questions she answered on her portal, on her web online account. So I'm just seeing these now that they're finished for her. But these are helpful because they help her step through the whole process. She identifies a time frame that she's going to meet her goal, and she's drafted a professional goal. She's going to come to, or he or she is going to come to that first three-way meeting with all of this done. So when the three of you come together at that three-way meeting, the teacher candidate has identified a goal, has identified his or her strengths and weaknesses, you've done an observation where you've identified strengths and weaknesses, and the supervising practitioner has identified that measure of student impact, and you're all coming together to make sure that all of these pieces are in place. You should leave that meeting with a clear goal, with a timeline established for the semester, that measure of student impact established, and the teacher candidate should know where he and she stands in terms of a starting point for growth over the whole semester. The final thing I want to show you is the CAP website. That is the guidelines website. Does this look familiar? Hopefully it does. So I got here by Googling Massachusetts CAP guidelines, and then I selected the first web link, and then on the web page I selected CAP guidelines. On this form, you'll see pre-conference planning forms, candidate self-reflection form, post-conference planning, candidate self-assessment, preliminary goal setting form, baseline. These are all under recommended. I strongly suggest that you consider making these available to your students by either giving them the link to this website and letting them go there themselves and downloading the Word document so they can fill them out on their computers and save them on their computers. Because if they make some error on that DESICAP website, it could disappear if you're using Internet Explorer, if power goes out or something. It's just good to have a Word copy saved on your computer. It also helps to give them a place to really write their ideas out, and they can have you review it. Because you as the program supervisor will not have access to all of the things that they're typing into the website. So I suggest giving them access to this website or sending them copies of all of these documents, having them send them to you digitally so you can review them and give them some feedback, and also making sure that you have good track of everything. We have one more thing that we want to add. So by that time, by that first three-way meeting, my partner has just reminded me that you all will have completed the entire pre-cycle, the entire step 1, and you will be basically finishing up step 2. So by the end of the first three-way, if you have the goal set, the measure of student impact learning identified, and you have all the baseline observation stuff done, you're done with step 2. Fantastic.